prayer for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lana Silk will transform Iran. Lana, what's your response to this? You heard the president's speech. We talked about the action and how the Iranian people are likely responding to this. What stood out to you with the president's statement there?
It was interesting that he talked about Iran being the world's #1 state sponsor of terror, and that's the case, isn't it? Iran has been a real sponsor of terror throughout that region, and in some cases beyond. But what's important to remember here is that the Iranian regime has an ideological goal here. When Khomeini took power back in 1979, he said, "We will export this revolution to the ends of the world." That ideology hasn't changed, and those who have come since then, whether it's Khamenei as supreme leader or even Pezeshkian, the apparently reformist president that took power recently, again, that rhetoric hasn't changed despite people's hopes for a modern, more reformed government. And we've got to be mindful that the Iranian regime is not a friend of the Iranian people. So as I was listening to that, I have to say my immediate reaction was quite somber, really, because I don't see the Iranian government giving up power anytime soon. This is a fight to the death for them, and they don't care what happens to their people as a result of this battle. They want to protect their theocracy. They want to protect their ideological goals, which extend far beyond Iran's borders. And for them, it's a black and white situation right until the very end, when there's absolutely no hope. They will fight, and I fear for what will happen to the people of Iran during that.
Yeah, very sobering thought, Lana. Very sobering thought, because of the way the Iranians have had to live and deal with this regime. In some of the conversations that you and I have had in the past, you've talked about the underground movement in Iran as it relates to people of all faiths, but most notably Christians and even Muslims who are turning now to conversions through their encounters with Jesus Christ through dreams. And we bring that in because there is a spiritual element to all of this, as Chris so rightly attested to, in terms of some of the prophetic things that have been taking place, and even getting back to Cyrus and Persia, where there's a better relationship between Persia and Israel. Tell me what you think, or what you've heard from the people on the ground in Iran, notwithstanding this latest event.
There is definitely a mixed reaction. It depends very much on the person's personal faith. Those who don't have a Christian faith and hope live in increased fear now. They are struggling for survival. They're worried about what the future will bring. They do want freedom from their government, but they're having to deal with the immediate impact of what that might look like for themselves. The Christians, those who have an eternal hope, and those who have been praying from a Christian point of view for a liberation for their country, have a slightly stronger position in that they believe God's hand in all of this. We've been praying, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We believe God is sovereign, and we're trusting him to take our country through this difficult time. It's interesting to me that several of you mentioned Cyrus in this segment. We've been talking a lot about the ancient leaders of Iran in our own ministry recently, and really remembering what a blessing the Persian rulers have been to the people of God through the Old Testament and a few since. And, the enemy is out to steal and kill and destroy. We know this from the scriptures. And what he's doing today is fighting to turn for evil what God has meant for good. I believe Iran is supposed to be a nation that will bless that whole region. That is Iran's call and destiny, and it has been that way in the past. And now we have this battle on our hands as there's a spiritual warfare going on too, as the enemy tries to keep control, but the purposes of God are to turn Iran to a blessing for the region. And I pray that will happen.
Chris, what do you think as we're seeing this now and these big strikes? I mean, if what President Trump said is accurate, Iran's essentially their whole foreign policy with the mullahs has been, we need to wipe Israel off the face of the map. And the nuclear weapon program and pursuing that is the primary vehicle for that. If it's completely obliterated and they're back to ground zero with this, they're back to start, and having to do this from scratch yet again, what do the other nations that have kind of supported Iran and kind of pledged sort of, one way or another with a wink, nod, or outright kind of sided with them. What do those nations do now after this crippling attack?
Well, I think they're going to have to wait to see how Iran reacts. I know Qatar has been an ally of Iran through the years. That's one nation. I know China has been getting a lot of oil from Iran. Thankfully, they haven't been involved directly, and hopefully they won't be. But I think some of their proxy groups are pretty well decimated to a large extent. You look at Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis in particular, some of the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. They're nothing, a shell of what they were back on October 7th. And who would have imagined, here we are almost a year and a half plus after October 7th, how much the Middle East has changed. Also, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Lana a question about what follows this. And I'm just also seeing that we're going to have to wait to see what kind of reaction Iran has against not only Israel, but any U.S. bases in the region. That is going to make a huge difference. And I would say that we may see a massive U.S. retaliation from President Trump if any U.S. bases or any personnel are harmed in any way. But my question, Lana, would be, you would imagine that in a nation like the size of Iran, there are a lot of people that certainly despise the regime. We've seen the protests for years and years. But is there sort of if there is a regime change, or if the regime is threatened in any way by a number of protests, would there be a sense of a civil war, in a sense that there will be some people that will be for the regime, other people against it?
I don't believe that those who are for the regime will be strong enough to put up a real fight in the context of a civil war. The strongest voice for the regime are those in leadership who are now being attacked. So I think a civil war is less likely, but of course there is unrest and discord when there isn't a power in place that unifies the country. I think we're in a good position with Reza Pahlavi, who has been doing a lot of work for a number of years now in building a viable opposition to the regime of Iran. It's not a new concept. He's been advocating for it and working towards it. There have been increasing numbers of summits and consortiums in pulling together real resources and coming up with practical plans on what it might look like to have a post-Islamic Iran. So we have at least a viable, if nothing interim, leader for Iran in him, I think, to carry us through to hopefully what will be democratic elections and a whole different kind of leadership.
Lana, what would be your message to the American people, given the fact that there are some Americans in Congress who are against this strike that took place, and they will try to hold the president accountable to their own view of what accountability is from a War Powers Act that's going to be taking place next week? Some of that is being led by Republicans, the president's party. And some Republicans and even Democrats applaud the president for this bold and decisive action that he has taken, along with our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel. So to the larger population of America, Americans are still somewhat confused about these kinds of affairs. A lot of people don't want to get involved in any kind of warfare. And the president has made it abundantly clear in his campaigning that he did not want to put America into any forever wars. When we look at this in its total context, though, in terms of what it could mean and the risk that's involved for making peace through strength, what do you say to the American people who might be a little perplexed by all of this, and some even in doubt and in fear and in anger because they don't understand the full dimensions of this?
I think Iran could not have been left unchecked. The reach of Iran for terror was beyond what probably we all fully know. There was real active effort to, as Khomeini said, to export their religion, their ideology to the ends of the earth. And I don't see that they would have stopped in their tracks unless they had been stopped from an external source. None of us want a forever war. None of us want the kind of unrest that we've seen in some other situations where there has been some involvement and then perhaps not a complete commitment to the end. So I guess what I would say is the Iranian people want freedom. The Iranian people have been brutalized and afraid of their own leadership for a long time, but they want a decisive end. So now that we're in this position, we would welcome affirmative action to take us to the final point and free the people of this brutal regime, and then work together with the Iranians to establish a democratic regime that will be a blessing not only to the Iranians but to the whole region.
All right, we have a statement that just came in. All right, Lana, your response?
Yes, I picked up on when he said first comes strength and then comes peace, and that's where we're right now, the show of strength then that we pray would lead to peace. When we as Iranians hear Operation Rising Lion, the first thought that comes to our minds is the original flag of Iran before it was changed when it became an Islamic Republic. The flag had an emblem of a lion right in the center, and then the Ayatollahs came in and they switched it for an Islamic emblem. And there is a sense within Iranians today that could it really be that thing that we have been daring to hope for is actually within reach, within grasp, that this our original roots, who we have always been, a friend to the West, a friend to the nations, a blessing to the nations. Could we really go back to that? And that is what we've all been praying for. And now we're pinching ourselves because there's this sense of, wow, this could really be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I appreciate all of you joining us here tonight. I appreciate all of you watching, tens of thousands of you watching on our YouTube stream and on the CBN News YouTube channel as we cover this. And as Lana said, there is a sense of excitement for the possibility to come. But of course, in the meantime, between now and then, there's a lot of consternation about what does this exactly look like? How much war is this going to take? Will the Iranian leadership now fight back? And so I think it's appropriate for us to close this segment in prayer.